have learned that night is not just an absence but a presence, a weight that settles on the roof until every nail remembers the hammer that drove it there. I did not start out believing this. I used to think night was a room you could cross, a corridor between days. Then I began collecting stories. People called me, wrote to me, sat across from me with their hands wrapped around paper cups that had long gone cold, and they told me what the dark had done to them. Somewhere along the way, the dark started leaving traces in my own house, or maybe I just learned where to look. If you are listening to me now, turn one light off. Not all, just one. Let the room develop a corner, a seam, somewhere the paint looks deeper than it should. That is the only stage I need, because all of this begins at the edges of a house on a mountain where prayer was supposed to hold the walls together, the edge of an industrial boulevard where a tree grew fat on exhaust and dust, the lip of a doorway salted with gray, the lip of a ceiling that dips into a shadow like an old well, the edge of grass beside an outdoor bathroom where something knew how to walk without having to be seen. I used to think monsters lived in the middle of things, the center of haunted hospitals, the heart of cemeteries, the core of old schools. But no, what waits for us waits at thresholds. It stands where you shift from one kind of floor to another and ask your body to pretend that is not a crossing. There are words for this in more than one language. In the places where these stories were born, they say the mountain houses hold on to what the wind can't carry. They say that a tree, once it reaches a certain age, becomes a tower anyone can climb from either side of the world. They say ashes at a door are not trash, but thread. I have heard a grandmother whisper a rosary with each bead warm from her skin and still feel that warmth fade when someone laughs at the wrong moment. I have watched a dog stare into the leaves of a tree and stiffen as if a whistle only he can hear has just named him. I have swept my own threshold and for no reason I am willing to accept, looked over my shoulder afterward. If you think I am building an altar from coincidences, I won't argue with you. An altar is only a table until something kneels in front of it. When I speak about the stories you are about to hear, I am not making claims for science to confirm. I am making room for memory. Memory does not care if you were careful. It does not care if you locked your door or left a lamp on or kept your voice steady. It chooses 1 second and throws the rest away. The second a cloth doll put its weight on a stone and scraped forward. The second a woman, longer than a woman should be, unfolded from a nest of branches without breaking a single twig. The second the wax of an unlit candle hardened in a shape that said it had recently been liquid. The second a child's arm rose of its own accord, pulled toward a slice of shadow in the ceiling that did not belong to any lamp. The second a mouth in the weeds did not whistle, but made a sound that felt like a whistle made of bone. I am not the hero of any of this. I am the archivist of seconds. You might ask why people come to me, why they trust me with the worst minute of their lives. Perhaps because I do not try to make them better. I do not tell the grandmother her laughter was harmless, or the man with the dog that he must have imagined a naked figure because the radio match was tense and his heart was already racing. I do not tell the husband and wife that ash at a door is just the leftovers of a barbecue, or the girl who felt a hand in the ceiling that it was a dream an 8-year-old could not climb out of in time. I have learned there is a cruelty in tidy answers. Answers can be cages. There is more mercy in a key you never quite finish turning. So I will not promise you safety, I will promise you detail. The soft saw of insects inside the walls of a wooden house just before night thickens. The way moonlight moves when wind stirs leaves like someone pulling silver thread through a wound. The scent of cold iron that clings to rails even when trains are miles away. The gentle chemical sweetness of candle wax not burned but bruised by heat. The warm breath of a dog fogging in cool air, the low tone he finds in his throat that makes you remember wolves were not that far back in his family. The scuff of a chair moving an inch over tile without a hand on it. The whisper that is not a whisper, but a shiver your teeth pick up before your ears do. If you hold these details long enough, they begin to hold you back. Belief is a door I do not ask anyone to walk through. I stand near it. I describe the wood, the varnish worn by other hands, the shape of the keyhole. I tell you that on the other side there are people who will swear to you that they saw a doll blink. They will swear to you that a figure with ash-colored hair unrolled itself from an ordinary tree and regarded them without embarrassment. They will swear their dining chair rose and fell without touch. That the light switches in their apartment learned a language they did not teach them. They will tell you that a child who once slept in a windowless room discovered the world had corners that open when you want out and snap closed when you change your mind. They will tell you about footsteps that came from a patch of weeds and about a mother who saw her daughter asleep in a place her daughter was not. They will tell you these things because they happened, and because the dark has a way of pretending it is modest until you look right at it. If you are ready, we will walk the edges together. I will take you to a mountain house where prayer rings against wood like a spoon against a glass, and where laughter misplaced by inches brings something small out of the grass. I will take you under a tree that has mistaken itself for a staircase and introduce you to the person who uses it. I will take you across a threshold dusted with a gray that does not come from any broom. I will take you to a child's room and stand with you under the corner you have never watched long enough to see moving. I will take you into a yard where nothing stands, and we will listen to a weight pass by without a body. We will not go far. We will not need to. Night, as I said, is not a distance. It is a pressure you can measure with your skin. One more thing before we begin. Keep your hands away from the edges. Do not lean on the door jamb while you listen. Do not rest your head against the wall. Do not stand under a branch you cannot see the end of. Sit where the light touches you in more than one place, and do not lose track of the chair you are sitting on. In the stories that follow, someone always makes a small mistake that invites something to cross. My mistake was not locking a door or laughing during a prayer. My mistake was believing that collecting these moments would not change me. The chair behind me has begun to remember that it can move. The bulb above my desk hums differently when I speak certain names. A faint smell of wax finds me when I am alone. These are side effects of paying attention. They are warnings if you prefer. Now, if you are ready, let's dim one more light, not all. Just enough so the edges can breathe. I was still a child when my grandmother told me the story, and even then, something about her voice kept me from laughing. She was not the kind of woman to exaggerate, not the kind to invent shadows where there were none. She grew up on a mountain in Antioquia, a house so far from the town that the path was nothing but stone and mud. To walk it in the rain meant your shoes would never dry. She said that kind of house, alone, perched high with its wood swollen by damp air, always kept things inside that did not belong to the family living there. The night she remembered most clearly began like so many others. It was 9 o'clock, the hour when her own mother lit a candle and placed it on a low table. The girls were meant to kneel, fingers working the rosary, their voices weaving together into a single prayer that rose like smoke toward the wooden ceiling. But children are not faithful by nature. My grandmother and her sister giggled, nudged each other, whispered nonsense between the lines of the Hail Mary. The candlelight caught their teeth when they smiled, and their mother's voice grew sharper, angrier. Finally, the old woman had had enough. She snapped the door open and pushed them out into the patio, promising that if they did not know reverence inside the house, they could spend the night under the eye of the mountain. The door shut hard, and their laughter fell away with it. Outside, the world was a kind of silence you only hear in places far from roads and electricity. The moon was high but thin, the kind of light that makes more shadows than it removes. My grandmother said that first. She still wanted to laugh. It felt like a punishment that would last only a minute before their mother softened. But then the quiet began to press against them, filling their mouths, their ears. And then they saw it. At the far end of the path, against the low bushes, stood something too small to be a person and too still to be an animal. It looked at first like a rag doll, the kind made from scraps of fabric with tufts of reddish hair and wide, round eyes. It should not have been there. They had no toys like that, and no neighbor was close enough to have left one. It stood on its own like someone had forgotten it there, but it was facing them, watching. They froze. My grandmother said her skin prickled the way it did when she had fever, a heat rising from the inside out. At first she told herself the moonlight was tricking them. That was when it moved. Not a step, not exactly. More like a dragging forward, a shuffle, as if the ground itself carried it closer by inches. Her sister grabbed her hand. They started pounding on the wooden door, calling for their mother. Inside, their mother thought they were playing at fear to get back in. She told them to stop pretending, to learn their lesson, but the figure scraped forward again. And again. Its body did not bend or sway. It floated in a rhythm out of joint with human walking. They were crying now. The laughter burned out of their throats, palms slapping splinters into their skin as they begged. My grandmother said she could smell damp earth rising from where the thing touched the ground, as if it pulled the soil up with every drag. The candlelight from inside leaked through a crack in the wall and fell just short of touching them. When the door finally opened, they fell inside like water through a broken dam. Their knees and elbows struck wood, but they didn't care. Behind them, the patio was empty. Their mother leaned past them, muttering about foolishness, and saw nothing. No doll, no movement. Only the still yard under the thin moon. But my grandmother swore that when she looked back through her tears, she saw the soil disturbed, as if tiny heels had pressed it down. She never told her mother that detail. Some things, she said, belong only to the ones who survived them. From that night on, the girls never laughed during prayer again. Their lips bled from the pressure of holding back. Their beads clicked faster than before. The candle flame threw their shadows long against the wall, but neither of them dared to turn her head. My grandmother told me this with a shiver in her hands, even though decades had passed. She insisted that what she saw was not a doll. She had grown up hearing stories of muñecos de trapo, left at doorsteps in rural villages, figures sewn with hair or bone, used to curse families. Children were warned never to play with toys they found outside. They belonged to someone else, or something else. She said maybe it had been a punishment worse than being locked out. Maybe laughter during sacred words was enough to call it. Maybe it had been waiting for them just past the light. Even now, she cannot kneel to pray without feeling her knees ache, not from age, but from memory. And when she fingers the beads of a rosary, she sometimes winces, as if tiny needles of cloth and thread prick at her fingertips, reminders of what watched her that night. And every time she ends her story, she whispers the same warning to me. Never leave a prayer unfinished, and never forget that silence in the mountains has its own teeth. I never wanted to believe in any of this. For most of my life, I had been the kind of man who dismissed ghost stories as the nervous inventions of people with too much time and too little reason. But that night on the industrial street of Guadalajara, everything I thought I knew about the world cracked open. It was a Saturday evening, not even late, maybe 9 o'clock. The factories around me still hummed, trucks groaned in the distance, and a pair of strangers crossed at the far corner. My dog trotted beside me, nose deep in every smell, while I half listened to a soccer match playing from my phone. There was nothing unusual, nothing to prepare me for what was waiting in that tree. The tree itself had always been there, a massive thing with roots cracking the sidewalk, branches tangled with wires overhead. I had passed it countless times without a thought. But that night, the leaves moved in a way that caught the light, and I saw her. At first, I thought it was just a sack caught in the branches, reflecting the glow of a passing car. But when I stopped and looked closer, I realized it was a figure, a woman, too tall, too still. She was crouched in the branches, nearly 2 meters high, her skin the color of ash, her hair tangled gray and long enough to curtain her face. She was naked, her body wasted and shriveled, yet she clung to that tree with a vitality that was impossible. I wanted to tell myself she was some vagrant, a hallucination, anything. But the way she held herself, silent and deliberate, was wrong. I turned slightly, pretending to ignore her, and that was when my dog noticed. His body went rigid, fur standing along his spine, a low growl rolling from his chest. It wasn't the sound of warning, no, it was the sound of recognition. He had seen prey, or worse, a rival. The woman moved, not with the clumsy descent of a body slipping from branches, but with a fluidity that made my heart seize. She slithered down the trunk, her fingers curling into the bark like hooks. From 6, maybe 7 meters above, she landed on the pavement with a thud. Her knees bent in a way that didn't break bone but should have. And then she looked at us. Her eyes were black. Not just dark, not just lacking color. They were like holes punched into her face, absorbing the streetlight. She opened her mouth, and what came out was not a scream. It was a growl so deep it seemed to vibrate inside my ribs, shaking the air in my lungs. My dog answered, barking violently, tugging against the leash, but his body was trembling in terror, not aggression. For a second, her gaze fixed on him, then slid onto me. She lifted one hand, fingers twitching as though she rolled dice no one could see. The sound from her throat warped, at times guttural, at times like a whisper of words in no language I knew. It made my ears burn. I began to back away, step by careful step, never giving her my back. My breath was shallow, my body taut, as if the slightest movement would make her pounce. And then she did move, running not toward me but away with a speed that did not match her frail form. She sprinted into the far shadows, toward the railroad tracks. Her body bent unnaturally low, arms pumping like an animal. I stood paralyzed, heart battering my chest until the rush of a bus passing jolted me back into myself. For a fleeting moment, I thought the driver must have seen her too. Surely someone else had witnessed the sight of a pale, naked woman darting into the dark. But the bus never slowed. Later, trembling in my own house, I tried to make sense of it. But 3 weeks afterward, I heard whispers in the neighborhood about a young woman who had died on that very street. She had been with friends when their car crashed, and though most survived with injuries, she alone was killed. People lit candles for her near the tracks, their prayers rising in thin smoke that drifted into the branches of that same tree. The realization hollowed me. Was it her spirit, or had something far older worn her shape to haunt that tree? I don't know. All I know is that the smell of rust clung to me for days, the smell of rails and blood. I stopped walking that way. Even now, if I pass within sight of those tracks, I feel the same pressure in my chest, the memory of black eyes locking onto mine. There are those who say every tree older than 3 generations becomes a crossroads. Its roots sink into what we bury, its branches brush what we cannot see. The woman I saw was no spirit at peace. She was caught between, dangling like fruit too bitter for either side of the world. And when the night air turns sharp and the dogs in the street growl at nothing, I know she is still there, waiting for someone else to pass, someone else to look. Too long. When my wife and I found the ashes, it was just another Saturday. The sun was still leaning low in the sky, and we were returning from errands with our daughters, tired but cheerful, in the back seat. I bent to unlock the front door of our apartment in Tijuana, and there it was. Spread across the threshold, a smear of gray powder like the remnants of burned paper or bone. At first, I thought maybe a neighbor had emptied an ashtray too close to our door. My wife, more unsettled than me, whispered that it looked like ceniza, ritual ash. She wanted to sweep it away immediately. We did, pushing it into the house, collecting it with dustpan and broom until it disappeared. We thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. That night, the television turned itself on. The blue glow filled the living room, even though we were certain we had cut the power. Over the next days, it was the lights. First in the kitchen, then in the girls' bedroom. Switches clicked when no one was near them, bulbs flared and hummed. We told ourselves it was faulty wiring, that old excuse for the impossible. But then came the candles. We kept scented candles around the apartment, unlit ornaments of comfort. One morning we found the dining table caked in hardened wax, the tablecloth stiff like skin. The candles themselves sat untouched in their holders, blackened wicks that none of us had lit. My wife swore she smelled something sweet during the night, like vanilla bruised with smoke. Still, we endured it. What choice did we have? Rent was cheap and our lives were stable. We convinced ourselves it was nothing. Until the night something small darted across the hallway. I saw it. My wife saw it. A figure no taller than a child, racing past the living room into the girls' room. I ran, ready to fight, ready to find some intruder. But our daughters were there, safe in front of the television, unaware. The room was empty. That broke us. We called for help. An aunt who practiced limpias, neighbors who knew the prayers to cleanse a home. They came with smoke and salt, holy water, and whispered Latin. We left for days, staying with relatives, and when we returned, the apartment felt calmer, the air lighter. For a moment, we believed it had worked. But then my wife sat alone in the living room one afternoon and heard the chair behind her drag across the tile. A slow scrape, like someone pushing it into place before sitting. She froze. The air thickened, pressing against her lungs. She refused to stay alone after that. And then, a few nights later, we both saw it. We had just turned off the lights in the dining room when the same chair lifted from the floor. Not toppled, not shoved, lifted, hung in the air as if gripped by invisible hands. Then it dropped. The impact thundered through the room, rattling glasses in the cupboard. My wife screamed. I could do nothing but grab her hand and run. We left that night with only what we could carry. Even as we locked the door, I filmed the apartment with my phone, proof for myself that every switch was off, every bulb dark. But the next day, when we returned for the rest of our things, the lights were glowing again, indifferent to our disbelief. We never slept there again. We never asked the new tenants if anything followed them. Fear has its own rules. Sometimes the less you know, the safer you feel. But I can't shake the sense that whatever entered our home came in with that ash. A threshold is not just wood and hinges, it is a mouth. Something was fed at ours and it came inside to stay. Even now, years later, we pass by the building sometimes and the temptation rises in me to ask, did they hear the chair move? Did the wax return? Did anyone else see the shadow slip into the girls' room? But I bite back the questions. The silence protects me. There was one more thing. During that time, our cat, the quiet guardian of our house, grew ill. The vet said it was cancer. He died before we moved. My wife believes the two were linked, that whatever entered through the ash took him first, as if the animal had absorbed what was meant for us. I don't argue. I still dream of that chair lifting, suspended in the dark. I wake to the scrape of wood on tile, though. Our new home has carpet floors. Sometimes I imagine the gray powder waiting just outside, patient, like a trail of dust from a fire no one remembers setting. I was only 8 years old when it happened. Too young to fully understand fear, but old enough to never forget it. We lived in a small wooden house in Alajuela, Costa Rica, the kind my grandfather had built with his own hands decades before. My room was the last in the hallway, tucked away like an afterthought, with no windows to the outside. My bed pressed into a corner, the walls around me sweating with humidity, the air thick with the scent of old pine and mothballs. That day I came home from school more exhausted than usual. My mother was cooking, the smell of garlic and oil filling the house. I dropped my bag in the room, and instead of turning on the television like always, I lay down. The mattress was lumpy, but the moment my head touched the pillow, sleep dragged me down like water. I dreamed of light, an arch of pale, spinning light. It turned and turned, not fast but endless, pulling me toward it. I tried to close my eyes against it, but the light pressed through my eyelids, burning a path inside my head. I wanted to wake up. Slowly, painfully, I began to open my eyes. That was when I realized my right arm was lifted into the air. It stretched toward the corner of the ceiling, my fingers spread as if something invisible had taken hold of me. My other hand clutched the blanket so tight my knuckles ached. My body felt heavy as though I had been drugged, my breath shallow, my mouth dry. And then I saw it. From the corner of the ceiling, the paint seemed to ripple, and a hole darker than shadow formed there, like a wound in the wood. From that wound emerged a creature. It crouched, its limbs thin as sticks, its skin a mottled brown like dried clay. Its ears were long, pointed, twitching with every movement. Its eyes were pits of amber light. It was pulling me. Its fingers dug into my wrist, though they never touched me. My arm moved because it commanded it, as if my muscles belonged to it. Its knees bent against the ceiling as if that surface were the floor. Its whole body straining to drag me into that darkness. The hole in the ceiling seemed to breathe, opening wider when I resisted. I panicked, a child's panic, pure, wild, desperate. I yanked back, using every scrap of strength my small body had. With a cry that barely left my throat, I tore my arm down and bolted from the bed. The moment my feet hit the floor, the hole was gone. The ceiling was only wood again, the corner plain and dead. But I knew what I had seen. I ran to the kitchen, my heart hammering like it wanted out. My mother turned from the stove, irritated, asking what was wrong. But I said nothing. I couldn't. In that house, silence was safer than words. My father's temper roamed the halls like a storm, my mother's face always tight with anger or exhaustion. If I told her that something in the ceiling had tried to take me, she would not believe me, or worse, she would. So I swallowed it. I kept the terror coiled inside me, never speaking of the creature again. As I grew older, I tried to give it names. In local stories, they called them duendes, mischievous beings, guardians of nature, tricksters who sometimes took children away. But duendes were meant to play, to hide objects, to steal food. What I saw was no trick. It was hunger. In church, I wondered if it had been a demon drawn by the violence in our house. Perhaps it fed on hatred, on fear, and the fights between my parents had opened the door for it. I thought of that black wound in the ceiling as a mouth waiting to swallow me whole. Even now, as an adult, the memory gnaws at me. I can still feel the numb ache in my right arm, as though fingers I could not see had bruised me from the inside. I cannot sleep under ceilings without staring into the corners first. I cannot relax in silence because silence feels like the moment before the ceiling splits open again. And sometimes when I close my eyes too long, I see the spinning arch of light returning, waiting for me to follow it back. I used to laugh at my cousins when they spoke of strange things happening at the rancho. Each year my family gathered there, fields stretching wide, the air heavy with crickets at night, the stars too sharp to belong to the same sky I saw in the city. They would tell me about shadows outside the bathroom, voices calling from the barn, whispers under the trees. I smiled, nodded, and thought it was nothing but stories born from boredom, until the night the steps came for me. It was late, maybe close to midnight. I had stepped outside just by the door of the house trying to catch a signal on my phone. I wanted to send a message to a friend before sleep. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of wet soil and distant cattle. Around me, the ranch was silent except for the insects, the occasional bark of a dog far away. Then I heard it. At first, just the faint rustle of leaves, then the unmistakable crunch of dry grass beneath a footstep. Slow, heavy, one, then another. I froze, phone clutched in my hand, the tiny screen casting a glow on my face. The sound came from the side of the house near the bathroom where an old tree grew. The branches were bare and the weeds around its roots stood like thin blades. Another step, a pause, another. My heart began to race, each beat thudding in my throat. Whoever it was, they weren't trying to hide. The footsteps were deliberate, too steady to belong to a wandering animal. I licked my lips, too afraid to speak, until a sound cut the night sharper than the steps themselves. A hiss, like someone calling me, short and sharp as though trying to get my attention without words. Ch-cht. Again. Ch-cht. The hair on the back of my neck bristled. I wanted to run inside, but something in me wanted proof. If it was my uncle playing a trick, I would catch him. I raised my phone, switched to the camera, and hit record. The screen shook in my trembling hand as I kept it pointed toward the tree. The hissing stopped. The steps slowed, then faded into silence. I waited, my heart a hammer in my chest. When nothing came, I went inside and replayed the video. What I saw chilled me. The footage was dark, almost black, but the audio was clear. The crunch of footsteps distinct, unmistakable, but there was nothing in the image, no body, no movement, no one leaving, no one returning. I barely slept, clutching the phone under my pillow, listening to every creak of the house. The next morning, when I confessed what I'd heard, my mother turned pale. She said she had seen me sleeping in bed all night, tucked under my blanket. I argued, told her I had been outside. She swore she saw my body motionless in the room. And then my aunt admitted that she too had heard me speaking in the night, whispering, "Who's there? Who's there?" over and over as if answering someone. I knew then it hadn't been my uncle. It hadn't been anyone human. People say the earth remembers. That paths trampled too often keep an echo of those who walked them. My grandmother used to warn that certain spots, especially near trees, are crossings, where those echoes turn into presences. Maybe what I heard that night was one of them, still walking the same path long after its body was gone. Or maybe it was something worse, something that used my voice and my image to fool my family while it tried to lure me outside. Sometimes silence is more frightening than sound. When the footsteps stopped, the stillness that followed was a deeper terror, as if the night itself had been holding its breath. And even now, when I walk across dry grass, I hear them again. One step behind me, heavy and patient, waiting for me to turn around. When I began collecting these stories, I thought they were just fragments. Separate events tied to different people, different countries, different lives. A doll of scraps in a mountain house. A woman of ash-colored skin hidden in a tree. A ribbon of gray powder across a doorway. A child's arm lifted toward a wound in the ceiling. Footsteps walking nowhere in a ranch yard. But the more I wrote them down, the more I saw the same shape hidden under each one. It isn't about haunted houses. It isn't about ghosts. It's about edges. Look at each scene closely. The girls punished at the patio. The thin line between candlelight and mountain night. The man and his dog walking a road between homes and factories. The couple's door marked by ashes. their home no longer private but breached. A child asleep under a ceiling corner where shadows pooled, a young woman standing just outside the house at the rancho, caught between indoors and outdoors. None of these things happened in the middle of a room. None of them happened in open daylight. They happened at thresholds, doorways, tree branches, corners, rails, paths. In old prayers, in Latin and in Spanish and in Nahuatl, there are words for this. Lugares liminal, sitios de paso. The spaces between spaces. Priests and shamans both warn about them. They are not only physical, they are hours, 9 p.m., midnight, the times between times. Children playing during prayer, laughter crossing over sacred words are like doors opening. A candle's flame is a lock as much as a light. Blow it out too soon or too late, and you shift the lock. An ash line across a door is not dirt. It is a thread, a bridge. A tree older than the street it grows from becomes a tower connecting two planes. Even our own bodies are thresholds. The way an arm rises without permission, the way a voice answers when you did not speak. Something waits at the edge of every human sense, patient as water on stone. People tell me I look for patterns because I want to believe. Maybe. But the patterns don't care if I believe. They keep surfacing like bruises. I think about the girl who saw the duende or demon at the corner of her ceiling. In some cultures, the upper corners of a room are where spirits gather, a place no broom can reach. In Catholic homes, a crucifix is often hung there, not just for devotion, but to seal that space. When the cross is missing or ignored, it becomes a gap. I think about the couple in Tijuana and their ash-marked threshold. In Mexican folk magic, ashes mixed with hair or bone are left at doorways to bind or call spirits. Sweep them inward and you invite whatever was tied to them inside. I think about the man in Guadalajara. In pre-Columbian lore, crossroads and trees by railways or rivers are perches for souls who have not decided where to go. That woman, if she was a woman, might have been a soul thrown from her body by trauma, clinging to the first branch it found. And the footsteps at the rancho. A sound without a body is a body without a sound. Doppelgangers, bilocations, el que camina atrás. Folk names for the echo that can walk beside you until you stop, and then it stops too. Maybe you call all this coincidence, but the people who told me these stories were not storytellers. They were frightened. They whispered details they had kept even from their families, the same details, the same patterns over and over. I have begun to dream of these edges myself. In my sleep, I find myself at doorways, under trees, at the lip of a hole in the ceiling. I smell wax where there is none. My chair groans when no one touches it. Sometimes, in recordings of my own voice, there is another tone beneath mine, like someone repeating my words a breath late. If you are listening now, take a moment to notice where you are sitting. Are you close to a doorway? To a window? To a corner of the ceiling? The stories you have just heard are not only memories, they are invitations. In every one of them, someone stepped too close to a threshold or mocked a prayer or ignored a sign. That was all it took. The edges are where the world is thinnest. They are also where it leaks. I tell myself I am only an archivist, a collector of what others endured. But lately, the edges have begun to follow me home. At first, it was nothing more than small disturbances, the kind anyone could dismiss. A chair that seemed slightly out of place in the morning. A bulb that flickered even though I had replaced it the week before. The faint waxy sweetness of candle smoke lingering in my study though I had burned nothing. But after I finished transcribing the last of these stories, something shifted. I was alone, headphones clamped tight, my desk lamp the only light. I listened back to a recording of the woman from Antioquia telling me about the rag doll in the patio. Her voice quivered, and beneath it, faint, too faint, I heard something else. A second voice. Not an echo, a response, the sound of cloth dragging on stone. I paused the file, heart hammering. The room went still. Then, from behind me, the wooden chair at my kitchen table scraped an inch across the floor. Slowly, deliberate. I sat frozen, every nerve taut, until silence closed again. The nights since then have not been easy. Sometimes I wake with the impression that someone has been sitting in that chair watching, their weight still pressing on the cushion. Once, as I closed my eyes, I thought I saw movement in the upper corner of my room. Nothing distinct, only the suggestion of a darker dark. I remembered the child in Alajuela, her arm lifted against her will. I pulled my own arms tight to my chest until sleep strangled me. And the footsteps. They have found me too. Twice now, while I worked late, I heard them crossing the hallway toward my door. Heavy, patient. I rose, certain I would see my wife or a neighbor in the wrong place. But when I opened the door, the hall was empty, only the sound of my blood rushing in my ears. I have learned to live with this, but it has changed how I move through the world. I never sit with my back to a door. I never let a prayer trail off unfinished. I keep salt in a dish at my entryway, a habit I once mocked when I heard it from an old healer. Most nights I fall asleep with every light blazing, only to wake at 3 a.m. in darkness I did not choose. Perhaps this is the price of listening. Every threshold is two-sided. The moment you lean in to hear, something else leans closer to you. So if you are still with me now, I ask you this: where are you sitting? Look around. Notice the corners of your room, the branches outside your window, the line where hallway meets door. The edges are everywhere, waiting for you to step too near. And when you hear the scrape of a chair behind you or the shuffle of footsteps across a floor you know is empty, do not pretend it is nothing. Do not laugh the way children laugh at prayer. Do not sweep the ashes inward. Because once something crosses over, it will not want to leave. Thank you for listening. Send me your story if you dare, but leave one light on. Trust me, you will want at least one.